Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, may I have your attention, please? Are you ready to engage in a mind-blowing experience and hear talks about life, technology, entertainment, and business? The next episode of HIPTHER Talks starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HIPTHER Talks. My name is Jasper, and I will be hosting today's discussion about artificial intelligence. My guest is none other than Péter W. Szabó. Peter, thank you for being here today. Now, to begin with, could you introduce yourself and tell us what you do and what your relationship with AI is?
Thank you so much for inviting me to this talk. At the moment, I'm leading an AI startup by the name of AceTech in the middle of Transylvania in Târgu. And before that, I was working in London. I was the senior manager for front-end UX UI at the Stars Group, which is now Flutter Incorporated. And before that, I was the UX director of What Users Do, now Users Zoom, which is one of the best user experience research platforms at the moment. And my background before the AI became a thing, or it became a thing as we understand it today, was in user experience, user research. I have written a book in 2017 with the title of User Experience Mapping, and I have now over 20 years in front-end, UI, UX related projects, and I have worked with many big brands and startups alike. And now, as I mentioned, my focus shifted towards AI and specifically enhancing user experience with the help of AI, and to a degree, using AI to make things easier, better. And among the many fields of AI, my focus is mainly on machine learning, I would say almost exclusively. And within machine learning, I was exploring a subfield called the collaborative filtering, but also solved quite a few optimization problems. And nowadays, I'm more interested in natural language processing and generative adversarial networks, which are very much advancing, which are advancing at a very fast pace in 2022, and hopefully this trend will continue next year.
Okay, so you've already mentioned quite a lot of more specific terms related to artificial intelligence. Now, while AI can hardly be considered a novelty, as far as I can tell, its constant and rapid evolution makes it difficult to keep up with it. So therefore, I'd first like you to define AI. What do you mean by AI? What is machine learning, and all these terms that you've mentioned?
I think the definition itself is constantly changing. As an academic discipline, artificial intelligence was starting to appear in the 50s of the last decade. And in 70 years now, it evolved quite a lot. So our understanding of AI, I would say, is vastly different than what it was in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s of the last century. But the core concept of the assumption that we can simulate human intelligence with a machine sort of stayed around, more of a wishful thinking than a definition. And as a definition evolved, it was very important to separate AI into different subfields, because if you want to define AI even today, anything that is decision-making logic can be fit into one of the more popular definitions, even very simple decision logics, which is obviously too broad to be usable in any shape or form. The fundamental concept became machine learning, which can be defined in a more exact, more useful way in order to work with it. By machine learning, even from the early days of it until today, we understand computer algorithms that improve automatically through experience, through continuous learning. And I think from this machine learning concept was at least has some very strong roots in machine learning. Almost all current solutions which the average user understands as AI. So if you think about a natural language processor like Siri or Alexa or whichever, or if you think about self-driving cars, or if you think about stock market prediction, all of those have the core concept of machine learning, because they passed through a huge data set in their training phases, through, we call them epochs, to many cycles of learning. And as a result, they can predict future events with quite a good accuracy, or they can differentiate between things. They can do things like identifying tumors on a CT scan, or they can make sure that the self-driving car stays on the road, and they can also understand the road signs and things like that. And all this is possible due to learning from a large data set of relevant things. For instance, if you want image recognition, the data set will be millions and millions of images.
So it is quite often said that AI poses a significant danger, some even considering it as a threat to humanity itself. Would you say this is real, or is it just another severe over-exaggeration by the media trying to raise more attention? You've mentioned art. Can it replace us can it replace artists as well?
I think that there is a bit of misunderstanding by the media there, but the threat is very real. But it's not the artificial intelligence by itself which is the threat to humanity, even to human life, but other humans are a threat to humans. And as the history of humankind shows, we are very capable of molding new technologies into weapons. So whenever a new technological breakthrough appears, very shortly it will be weaponized. And this happened with a lot of things. You can even in the antiquity, things like bronze working or smelting into the combustion engine. Obviously, it can be used in a car, but it can also be used in a tank. And it's very likely that if the combustion engine exists, very shortly tanks will appear. And same with atomic fusion, electricity, you name it. sooner or later it will be turned into a weapon. Now, unfortunately, AI-enabled or AI-aided weapon systems already appeared, so that's no longer a possibility. And with this reasoning, it's very easy to understand why this is dangerous, because it turns killing other human beings a sort of impersonal thing, because you are no longer directly killing other humans, you are just instructing a machine to do so. So it's much more remote. If you have, let's say, a killer drone with a facial recognition algorithm and a patching algorithm and a lot of AI-based algorithms, which will enable that drone to kill someone, even if it's guided, or even if the input is given from miles and miles away, or even from the other side of the world. So from this perspective, AI is very dangerous, and also it's very scalable, because it's very easy, if you have the necessary funds, to create a huge army of machine learning driven killer bots or killer drones or whatever. Probably a drone is more practical than a walking drone, like in a Terminator style human-like drone. Is less practical than one that can fly, and it's very small inside. So also AI-driven war fighter planes or other machines of the war, but I think the fighter planes are the most obvious example, will not just will, but already are outperforming human pilots, especially because they can do maneuvers which would be impossible for a human pilot due to the accelerations and the lateral G's and all that things which are happening in a real aerial combat situation in modern combat. So sooner or later, all the fighter planes and all the bomber planes and most of the warfare will be totally transformed by machine learning, and this could lead to a war where you can circumvent human consciousness, because if you have human soldiers, they in at least in theory, but usually also in practice, they have some sort of consciousness. So they will ideally not obey orders for mass murder or killing the civilians and things like that. But if you create a machine learning algorithm which doesn't have that sort of constraint, it will mean that if you have the necessary funds and you are quite evil, you could order the execution of thousands or even millions with the press of a button. So that's why it's very dangerous, but not AI itself is dangerous. It's human nature, which is proven to be very dangerous through the centuries, and unfortunately, that's still the case even today.
Allow me to quickly get back to that idea of the Industrial Revolution. It is said that we are right now living the fourth industrial revolution, which is AI and the Internet of Things and this huge ecosystem of interconnected machines and algorithms. How significant is this fourth industrial revolution? Have we seen most of what it has to offer, or is this just the beginning that we are living right now?
That's a question that would be much easier to answer 20 years in the future than it is now. But it's very likely that we are at the beginning of it, mostly because the term itself, the fourth industrial revolution, was popularized at the World Economic Forum 7 years ago. So that's since 2015, since Klaus Schwab started to use this term, we start to think about the fourth industrial revolution, and it's representing a change. And with all changes, it's very hard to draw a clear line that, okay, this was the digital age, which most people would put in the 90s and the first decade of the new millennia. So things in about 7 or 10 years ago, and spanning back until the beginning of the internet and the popularization about, so from, let's say, from 94 until the early 2000s. So that's, if we call that the digital age, then we are now transitioning in a new age of humankind, where everything is data-driven, and we try to do more and more automations and trying to connect things in a way that was not even imaginable before. And they say that the age we are transitioning into with the fourth industrial revolution will be probably called the imagination age, because anything you can imagine can be created with machine learning. And this is why I think prompt-based AI-generated art is the prime example or the flagship product of the early stage of the imagination age, because you imagine something, you tell it to the AI, and the AI creates it. So that's why it's an age of unbound imagination. But obviously we are at the beginning, and just now we are trying to explore what is possible to imagine, if that makes sense. So and also another aspect of Industry 4.0 is what they usually call the decentralized decisions. So of course now everyone is talking about the crypto bubble bursting, and they are comparing with the dot-com bubble bursting in the third industrial revolution, and they are not very dissimilar, so that has some merit in it, but it doesn't matter because similarly with the dot-com bubble bursting, it's not that after that period of turbulence, the technologies which were born before the dot-com bubbles bursting, they didn't survive. Quite the contrary, they become so commonplace that nowadays we can't even imagine our life without things like the domain name system, things like online payments, things like e-commerce in the scale of Amazon, and many other similar things which were the byproduct of the third industrial revolution. And I think the same thing will happen with blockchain. I don't believe that cryptocurrency is the best use for blockchain, but the blockchain technology, and definitely not NFTs, but blockchain by itself as a means of decentralized decisions will very likely stay with us in the decades to come, and this has the potential to become one of the defining factors of this age of imagination, because when everyone can imagine whatever they wish, in order to avoid total chaos and total anarchy, you need to have some sort of decision-making structure. But the current human structures, such as governments, such as corporations, are not really fit for this new era, and that's why I believe that oddly enough, the power will go back to the people, and I'm not saying this in a communist way. Instead, it means that the individual contribution will be exponentially larger.
Okay, bit of an open question as we are nearing the end of our discussion. Do you think that, so doesn't this implementation of AI and the significant improvement of user experience raise concerns of data privacy, of responsible gambling? You know, because I suppose these improved experiences somewhat aim to keep the player coming back and keep the player spending more time on the website. And also you mentioned advertising, you know, having the site in the color of a specific team, and maybe even including merch or whatever. I'm really not an expert on this topic. Doesn't that complicate things? I know I've asked quite a big question, but you know, I'm just I want to also touch upon this side of it as well.
That's a very good question. Actually, privacy with GDPR and CCPA and other things became a really hot topic in the machine learning community, and rightly so, because it's easy to understand that the user's personal data is very valuable. But fortunately, for machine learning, we can work very easily and just as good with totally anonymized data. Contrary to traditional segmentation, you would need things like the user's gender, location, age, things like that to segment the users. Now, with machine learning, we no longer need to know where does this user lives, what's their gender, their age, their whatever, their occupation, salary range. Those were really, really important in the past for targeting, but now they are not needed due to a machine learning algorithm called the collaborative filtering, which creates a lot better prediction and a lot better targeting without the need of any personal data, by the similarities and dissimilarities between different users. So in a nutshell, you can imagine this as a huge matrix where, and by huge I mean millions and millions of rows, where all the rows are users and all the columns are different items, which you can define however you wish. Maybe they are themes, maybe they are elements, maybe they are button colors, whatever. And then you would see that somehow you measure the likelihood of a user interacting with that item. And for some users, you will have that already measured because you track them on your site and you know that the user with this ID, and you don't know anything personal, just an ID assigned to them when they first visited the website or when they registered. So it's not tracking them in a conventional sense. You just have a user ID, and that user ID interacted with Arsenal in a very favorable way. And then you know that another user ID did a lot of similar things than this user, but when you look at the Arsenal cell of the matrix, you see a zero, that meaning that we don't know if this person will like or they wouldn't like that. So that's a tricky situation, but experiments have proven that it's very likely that two very, very similar users would if they match in other things, they would also match in this one. So we don't need to make a differentiation based on location, age, and gender and other things in order to target them with Arsenal themed advertising or homepage or whatever, because we know that similar users love Arsenal. Therefore, this user is very likely to love Arsenal. But the first time we see that they are not engaging with the Arsenal content we are creating, now we have data about that user object pair, and now we are no longer bombarding them with Arsenal, because it's also possible that there is not a good match there. But maybe based on this new information, we know that now this is more similar to that specific Chelsea fan. So now we will target them with Chelsea team stuff and things like that. So the system is getting better and better. And through continuous learning and online learning, it means that at some point in the near future, we will have all our existing users perfectly mapped to their preferences. And when a new user arrives, even after a few seconds, they will get a very, very accurate prediction.
Okay, well, thank you for this discussion. Before we finish, how could you formulate a key takeaway of our discussion today about AI, about the industry? What would you say is something that we should take away from this discussion?
I think if I have to summarize everything in one sentence, or maybe more than one, but in a summary like way, I would say that AI is definitely the future. Machine learning will define our day-to-day lives, and it will be essential for all industries. But if you think about the gaming industry, those operators who are very fast to go in the direction of machine learning, even when the field is not established, even when it's a new thing, they can gain a significant competitive advantage. And this has the potential to totally reshape the industry in in a way that was not thought to be possible before, and current market leaders might lose their position, and new companies, even totally new out of nowhere brands could take over a large user base because they were fast to implement a machine learning based customer experience for all their users. So I believe that now is the best time to start thinking about machine learning and how you can employ it to create a competitive advantage for your company, or how you can benefit from it in any other way.
Peter, thank you so much for today's discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, Péter W. Szabó was my guest in this episode. Thank you for listening. Check out the other episodes, and I hope to see you all next time.
Thank you for joining. Be sure to check back next week for the next HIPTHER Talks, and subscribe on Amazon Music, Overcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, and Pandora.